Everyone, it's Chris Maguire here from Business Cloud. We're doing a joint webinar today with UKfast, looking at the whole issue of GDPR and are we ready? It comes into force next year on the 25th of May, and we are joined by a select panel of experts and people who are going to talk about what GDPR means to them and whether or not they're ready. So let's start with an introduction. I'll start to my left, if I may. Just say who you are and what you do.
Good morning, my name's Daniel Burton. I'm the CEO of a company called Wonderwall. We're a consumer electronics company focusing on intelligent living.
Okay.
Hi, my name's Liz Ashall-Payne. I'm the founder and chief executive officer of Orca. Orca are the world's largest health app library, which helps you and clinicians to find, use and recommend health apps.
Hello, I'm Elizabeth Clark. I'm the CEO of Dream Agility. We're based out in Silicon Valley. We have a bit of software that sits between Google and a retailer. We're a Google Premier Partner and one of only 35 Google Shopping Partners in the world.
Should just say, because this audience is going out across the world, not everyone will know where Silicon Valley is. It's Ramsbottom, referred to by some people in Ramsbottom as Silicon Valley. Okay.
Yeah, hi, I'm Anna Dick and I'm CTO for Hiring Hub. We connect employers and agencies through our online marketplace.
Hi, I'm Dave Helliwell from Helliwell Media Relations Consultancy.
Yeah, I'm Chris Maguire, editor of Business Cloud, and I'll be chairing today's discussion.
Martin Knapp, formerly Managing Director of SIA, now looking after UKfast Public Sector.
Christina McGurk, I am Marketing Director here at UKfast.
Chris Hunter, Director of HM Network in Preston, and we also run some GDPRexpress events, helping small businesses get to grips with GDPR.
Right, the format today will be I'll be speaking to each panellist for a minute or two, and then we'll be opening it up to questions, a general discussion. At any time, people can submit a question. They can use the Twitter hashtag, which is BCGDPR. We had a roundtable before today, breakfast event rather, before today, and we had some expert lawyers in, and there was a real ambiguity about whether or not every company was going to have to adhere to GDPR. The answer was yes. Elizabeth Clark, you kicked off a big argument on that one as well, but I think the message that came out is people don't know a lot about GDPR, which is the reason why we put this panel together of real businesses and experts who are engaging with businesses. You can also submit questions through the usual webinar address as well. So let's kick things off by Daniel speaking to you. You're a real business. Are you worried about GDPR?
Yes, in short. We are a company that collects huge amounts of data. We have 130 sensors in people's homes, so actually it's quite key for us as a business to really actually give the consumer the understanding of what we're doing with their data. So for us it's actually really key, and we've spent a lot of time and a lot of money focusing on this. So yeah.
In terms of Wonderwall, certainly I always think of Oasis when I think of Wonderwall, which is the reason, one of the names for the business. Wonderwall is I call it a brain on the wall. Everything I want to do in the house, I could do by talking to this device, this Wonderwall, which is about the size of a large cricket ball, isn't it?
Yeah, in short, we invented a very intelligent light switch, and what this light switch does is replace the standard light switches in the home, but this light switch has 13 different sensors in it. And what we do is really understand how people live and behave in the home. We collect that data and we have machine learning and predictive modelling that learns from that data, and then that gives us the ability to control all aspects of your heating, your lighting, your security, your safety. It's all voice controlled and all integrated with Sonos as well. So
one of the things that came out of the event today was we had 80 businesses in the room. I asked for a show of hands how many people thought they knew what GDPR was, and not one hand went up. Even mine didn't go up. But I just thought there was that sort of lack of knowledge. Liz, you are an award winner. You recently won our Tech First event here on this very stage. You look at health apps, of which there are hundreds of thousands, lots and lots of data.
Absolutely.
Are you ready for GDPR?
So as an organisation ourselves, we don't collect a lot of data, but what we do is we review health apps so that we can advise the healthcare professionals and the patients and all of us about what the app's going to do with your data. So we are ready. One of the things that we do is we horizon scan globally any new standards and regulations that are coming out, and we build that into our review process. But are the app developers ready? Probably not, but what we're able to do is support them to be ready, and also help healthcare professionals and organisations find developers that are ready, so that data can then be used in an intelligent way.
Elizabeth Clark, you caused a big rumpus today, not for the first time. We'd heard from two fantastic lawyers. Sean Crotty from Waitmans, and also our own in-house lawyer here at UKfast, Nicola Frost. And the message was loud and clear that every business needs to be GDPR compliant. You then started waving around Article 30 and said, if you employ less than 250 people, you don't. I think you do, but what's your take on it? And as a business at Dream Agility, what do you think you have to do for GDPR?
I think any business has to be respectful of people's data. So without GDPR or anything else, we're very respectful of people's data, and we try and make sure it's all secure. We don't leave anything lying around in strange pockets. All our systems are integrated, and we know who has access to what, and we can turn that on and off at any time. So I think it's become the new millennial bug, if anyone remembers that far back.
I do, and you know I do.
But I remember sort of 20 years ago when people were spending a fortune, everyone was out there saying, you've got to be compliant, you've got to be compliant. What happened? Nothing. And, 96% of business in the UK turn over less than £1 million. How on earth are all these people going to be subject to GDPR? Who's even going to look at it? It's to protect the man in the street from the talks of this world who have basically let all your data be breached. It's making them take it a lot more seriously.
I mean, Talk were the subject of a big security breach. They're not the only ones. Companies big and small have been targeted by hackers as well. I mean, the point that came across earlier today, and I think most people on the panel would agree, is that ignorance is going to be no defence. But there does seem to be a lot of ignorance around GDPR, and so few companies seem to be aware of it and what it means.
It's a live document, so it's changing all the time. And in the UK, if you look at any European legislation when it comes in, it leaves Europe and it's this thick, and by the time it gets to the UK and we've adopted it, it's this thick. As Brits, we like to dot I's and cross T's, and while the rest of Europe's looking at it and going, okay, we're going, what does it exactly mean? What does
that mean, ho-he-ha?
Ho-he-ha. I employ a couple of French people, they say that all the time. It's about, if you're watching Marlene, ho-he-ha, it's about, it's an interpretation of what's going on. These things, until they're actually out there and implemented, you don't know how people are going to interpret it and how people are going to be penalised for it. So it is a live working document, and like I say, eventually it's going to be adopted instead of the Data Protection Act, so at which point everyone's going to be subject to everything in it.
First question has come through already, but I won't ask it now, but it's from Reem from IDT Support, so we'll come back to him in a second. But in terms of Hiring Hub has just had £1.4 million worth of investment. You're not a recruiter, but you provide a platform for people to hire. So you handle lots and lots of data. You're new in post, which probably reflects the fact that it's a fast-growing company and wants to make sure it's got all its house in order. What's your take on GDPR?
Yeah, so I think definitely we've always had this investment, so we're looking at maturing the organisation, and generally, security is really important, and especially how we look after our customers' data and how we transact that through our, through our platform. We are taking it very seriously. Just yesterday we were at the board putting forward some recommendations in terms of taking a chunk of that investment and looking at how we prioritise some areas for general security of our customer data, obviously moving towards GDPR, and then really it's going to be about prioritising how we kind of chunk through that in line with other business priorities as well.
You mentioned earlier in the event that you employ 20 people, and it's now being discussed at board level and that everybody in the company is aware of GDPR. That seems to be my experience. Companies of your size are now very aware of GDPR. Would you say there's the light switch has been flicked on?
I think definitely, if nothing else, it's made people think differently about data. It maybe put a bit more of a personal slant on it in terms of it is about people, it's people's data. So I think from our perspective, that's very much how we're looking at it. And just to be having those conversations now, and for more people in the organisation to be aware of the importance of keeping that data secure is great.
Thanks very much. David Helliwell from Helliwell Media. You offer a slightly different take. Your background is as a newspaper journalist and editor.
Yep.
You're now poacher turned gamekeeper. You're working in the whole world of PR and marketing, so you're dealing with customers, clients, businesses. Mm-hmm. What are they telling you about GDPR?
Well, they've got a lot on the plate, haven't they? So it's just one of many things they've got to juggle. And as we were saying earlier, I think as we get into the new year, start of January 18, I think there are more conversations happening about GDPR now. There is more general understanding probably at managing director level and probably within the exec team. But apart from those bigger companies, I don't think a lot of the SMEs are really there yet. And obviously they've got a job to do if they are going to try and be compliant by May next year.
That's one of the things that came out loud and clear earlier today, was that the really big companies have probably got somebody in to do their GDPR. So a company of the size of UKfast, 400 employees, they've got somebody devoted to doing GDPR as well. The companies, and as you mentioned earlier, Elizabeth, 96% of companies are turnover less than £1 million. The small people maybe either don't think it's relevant to them, or it's just one extra thing they don't really want to do. What's your take?
It's one of those things they have to get around to, isn't it? You know, I've read quite a bit about GDPR and talked to quite a few businesses, and I think a lot of them are now at the stage of doing some kind of data audit, so they at least begin to understand exactly what they hold, both on their own employees, on customers, where they have them in different places as well. And I think that's one of the big aspects of this, is it's going to be a huge tidying up process.
One of the things that came out loud and clear is that it kicks into place on the 25th of May, but you know, they're not expecting people to be fined on the 26th of May. No. But if you can't demonstrate that you've got your processes in place now, by then you're going to be on a sticky wicket. Yeah,
but I think it's like anything else, isn't it? You know, businesses still have got time to react and get their house in order, or at least show a path towards getting it in order. But it's one of those, you know, you can't leave it till the end of April to get something moving.
Somebody who definitely won't have left it to the end of April is Martin from SIA. Martin, I mean, when I think of SIA, I think you deal with the public sector, governments, etc., the whole issue of security. Okay, so you're the expert. What's your take on GDPR?
Really, for the last 15 years, we've been compliant with the DPA, Data Protection Act. To us, GDPR is just an enhancement of DPA. It tries to probably put a little bit more of a handle around the data owner and the data processor and what their individual responsibilities are, and that's where it sort of refines what the DPA is about. Obviously, ICO is still the body that can fine you for it, and some of that has got a little bit more serious. But I think for anybody out there that's been used to DPA, GDPR shouldn't be this great big elephant in the room.
No, Martin, can you use any more abbreviations?
sorry.
I don't think you've used the whole word yet.
Okay.
You know,
Data Protection Act.
Yeah,
DPA,
yeah. Okay.
So,
but that's an interesting point, though, isn't it? Because, and that was a point that was raised earlier, that if you've got your Data Protection Act, if you're adhering to that, then you know, this sort of GDPR is like an extension of that. So if you've got your house in order for the first one, it's not beyond the wit of man to get your house in order for the second one.
Not at all. I mean, we're regulated by Government Security Services, and I'll try, one more acronym. NCSC are the main cyber security body here in the UK. Advice from those guys was, like Elizabeth said, there will be a bedding in period. There's not going to be shutters come down on the date. So both sides, both industry, government, and the Act itself, it will evolve. And there'll be this period of learning together. So.
No, as I say, you're a relaxed individual. I couldn't ever imagine you being concerned by it. Christina, you're head of marketing at UKfast, and marketeers generally collect lots and lots of data about people. And one of the words that's come out loud and clear, especially around marketing and lists and data, is consent. Is GDPR on the top of your priority list?
It's certainly one of the main priorities. I think it's an interesting area for marketeers. I've kind of gone out publicly saying I think it's a great opportunity to create a richer, more qualified database that enables your opportunity for converting your database. It increases the opportunity, but I think, you know, looking at it by department, you know, I'm slightly biased, but I think marketing departments are going to be hugely affected by GDPR, more so than any others, especially around specific platforms, you know, such as email, direct mail, etc. If you think the last time that anybody really had to explore their database before the introduction of sort of digital marketing was the last act, I think, in '98. If you think digital platforms evolved significantly since then, and the volume of information we now have on people is huge. So I think, looking at it from a marketing perspective, gaining consent from people is going to be an opportunity for businesses out there, but it's going to be a challenging opportunity.
But I mean, the fact is, there's been some unscrupulous companies out there who have been abusing our data, and it's our personal data that they're taking advantage of. Companies that have always been responsible, you know, you'd expect them to be okay. Do you think there's a bit of scaremongering going on?
Yeah, definitely. I think, you know, every customer, realistically, they just want transparency from a business. You know, the biggest thing that you always go on about is about how do I build brand loyalty, how do I build, you know, brand consistency, how do I build a better relationship with my prospects and my customers, and that's by being honest and upfront and them feeling like they can trust you, and you build brand trust. And so I think the kind of scaremongering is it's actually in favour of a customer. So the more transparent you are with people about, I want to contact you about something, the more likely they are to trust you when you contact them again. So no, as I said, I think it's, at the moment, it is marginally terrifying just thinking of the volume of stuff you've got to do to get yourself compliant. But at the same time, once that has been implemented, you know, you just think about how rich the opportunity might be in the future.
Chris, I'm coming to you last in this first section. I've got a question that I think it's probably relevant to you to answer, actually. Okay, what do you think our trading position should be in relation to Brexit negotiations? I'm only joking. It's
Get my coat.
It's Christmas. We're having a bit of fun. Reem from IDT Support says, how will GDPR affect the IT companies, and what should we do to prepare ourselves? That question could almost be relevant for any company, you know, because IT will be treated the same way as any other company. What should companies be doing now?
They should be making sure that staff are trained, that they're aware, because you've got your digital firewalls, which are your physical protection on your network, but you've also got human firewalls, which are your staff. Ultimately, you can spend a fortune on making your digital network nice and safe and secure, but you've got one member of staff that accidentally emails a load of personal data out by mistake, or they CC in a load of addresses rather than blind carbon copying. That's potential data breach if you've got more than 100 records of standard data or one record of sensitive data. So staff awareness is key, I think. I think cybersecurity is probably only 10% of what GDPR is about. The majority of it is re-educating staff and changing cultures in existing businesses as well.
A lot of people talk about cybersecurity. It's a big issue at the moment, and they imagine hackers coming in from Russia. I interviewed a politician from Estonia, and he was talking about like state-sponsored, hacking. But the reality is, a lot of stuff that comes in is through negligence within their own companies, or member staff gets dismissed, and then they turn against their company. I suppose with GDPR as well, you're only as strong as your weakest link.
Exactly.
So it doesn't matter where you are in a company. You all have to know about it, and you all have to be, you all have to be on your guard, I suppose.
You're right. I don't think there's one department that can own GDPR. It has to be adopted by everybody in the business. There's too many slopey shoulders going on. People saying IT are dealing with it, HR are dealing with it. Everybody needs to take ownership of it. It's a good opportunity to have a massive sprinkling of data that you don't use. Get rid of the stuff you don't need. If you've got 10,000 customers and you only speak to 1,000 of them, concentrate on the 1,000 that you work with, purge the rest, get rid of the stuff that you don't need anymore, and minimise the risk.
Reem's question, from IDT Support is, what should companies be, what should you be doing now? What should companies be doing now? Or what are you doing now? As a company, Daniel, you're on this panel. I think a lot of people who came to the Brexit event today were here because they wanted to know what they should be doing, because they don't know. What should companies be doing now?
Personally, we have a team of lawyers working on this for the last 2 months. So writing all of our documentation, we employed a DPO, which is a data protection officer, which has to sit separately to the business and not be part of the board that can actually take responsibility for this. So we have to take it very seriously, and obviously we're spending a lot of money on actually liaising with the correct bodies to actually work out what we're doing and make sure all the processes in place for actually when we're doing this. So.
We're coming up to Christmas, Daniel, and Father Christmas is watching down right now, okay? He's got his naughty book, he's got his good book, okay? You can't lie to me, otherwise you're going to go into the naughty book. If I ask you a question, you must be truthful.
Yeah.
Do you agree? When did you first hear the term GDPR?
Probably about 3 months ago.
And that's amazing, because the last 2 months you've employed a data protection officer.
We had to, yeah. As soon as we found out, obviously what we were doing. Well, to be honest, it was more about. I probably took it more seriously 3 months ago, because at the end of the day, I was too focused on building a product. So actually, my focus was building a great product. Then actually, when it comes to actually that product's been done, now what do we need to get in place to actually put all this and put all the paperwork in place? That's when I started taking it seriously. So we'd heard of it, but actually, seriously, when we started taking note of it, was actually about 3 months ago.
When you look at the numbers, €20 million fine, or 4% of your turnover, you've got to take it seriously. I've just had a quick look, actually, Elizabeth, and you've been on the naughty list for the last 17 years.
I'm very naughty.
You take quite pride on that. But as a company, when did you become aware of GDPR?
quite early on, I was at a retail breakfast, I think, with PwC, and they had this lawyer on the stage, and I decided they must have run out of things to talk about, and this bloke was going on about GDPR. And I'm thinking, oh God, this is going to be the next thing the lawyers all start ramming down our throats. And actually, they've only just started ramming it down our throats. We've had a lot longer not hearing about it. I think they've done it on purpose. So they've crept up on us in stealth mode. So you have to go to them and take advice and pay money. Whereas if they'd sort of been saying it a bit earlier, people would have been sort of getting on board with it. But like I said, PwC, they were the first. Was it January before last? I think I heard it.
January before last. I mean, you recently joined Hiring Hub, Anna. I mean, so it's not fair to ask when Hiring Hub became aware of it. Knowing them as I do, they'll have all their ducks in a row. When did you first become aware of GDPR?
So previously to Hiring Hub, I was with Co-op Digital, and I think the Co-op generally have been talking about GDPR for years. It seemed like it was something that they always knew was on their radar and was very important to them, having member data. So when I started there, I started hearing about it, but it was never core to my role, so never kind of went too deep with it. Not like I have done in the last 3 weeks, anyway.
Yeah, I'm going to come to Dave and Christina in a second, because I want to ask them a question much more about the PR, the marketing side of things, you know. But I mean, the thing is, I would imagine you became aware of GDPR before anybody else in the world, Martin, because what happened in Ribchester, you know, you found out what the world found out in weeks and months to come. When did you become aware of GDPR?
Yeah, it's probably a good 12 to 18 months ago,
Yeah.
Chris.
And you started doing something about 2 weeks ago?
Yeah, that's right. I think we were always interested in what the differences were to the existing Data Protection Act, and trying to get some clarity around what additional things do we have to do. You know, what was good enough to roll over from what we used to do or still doing today, and what extra things we had to put in place.
But on a serious point, I mean, I know how responsible SIA are, because the clients you're dealing with are super, super serious. Now, are they saying to you now, have you got your GDPR side compliant?
Not really. I think the clients, they're struggling to understand themselves, and these are government bodies, and they're dealing with data from, let's say, local councils with you know, lots and lots of personal information. They're merging that into these big databases, big data engines now that are trying to analyse data and deliver out to the public the services they want to see. So I think in terms of us as a provider, hosting provider, and keeping data secure, the people and the processes are really, really important alongside just the technology. But it's the clients themselves, it's the end users that are, the local councils are not actually quite sure what GDPR means to them when they're now starting to share public data.
Yeah. You're nodding, you're either agreeing or you're falling asleep.
No, I'm really agreeing. I mean, we've seen a number of our own clients approaching us, asking how they can prove to their supply chain and also to their client base how they can prove that they are GDPR compliant. The reality is, you can't wave a certificate and say we are compliant. You can only be the best you can be and be prepared. In case you ever get a knock on the door from the ICO saying there's been a breach, there's been an incident, how do you deal with processes? How do you deal with subject access requests? You know, how do you document the marketing that you're doing? Where you get your data from? What consent you've got? You can never be 100% compliant. I think anyone that holds a hand up and says, yeah, we're there, they're lying. Because you're always going to take on new staff. You're always going to have new platforms coming out. You're always going to have new bits of data floating around. You just need to be as safe and secure as you can.
Just a reminder, if you want to follow the conversation on Twitter, you can. It's hashtag BCGDPR. It relates to the event that we ran before. Dave and Christina, I was thinking to myself, how much stuff have I had about GDPR, other than from law firms or PR companies, you know, actually from chambers of commerce, actually from the government, actually from business organisations. And there's been so much stuff about Brexit, but there's been very little about GDPR from a marketing perspective. Is that your experience?
I don't think there's been massive amounts from the government themselves. I think those, like the chambers of commerce and growth hubs and people are beginning to put more events together and more, because they're obviously being asked about it. Because not every company can obviously afford a team of in-house lawyers to try and make sure they are compliant. So there's definitely more questions around it, but I still think people are a little bit grasping as to what are all the implications for their particular business, because every business is different.
Yeah.
It acts differently in what information it holds on employees, on customers, in terms of marketing and PR, you know, people who buy in lead lists and things like that. There will be a lot of questions going down this supply chain, I think, of trying to find out, you know, how that is now structured, where that information comes from. I was reading something the other day that says that, so I talk to a lot of journalists, I send a lot of unsolicited information to journalists, that technically that's going to be a problem in the future. Now, that's got to be daft, because journalists, without getting unsolicited information, they're going to be sat twiddling their thumbs for a lot of the day. So I can't believe that one's quite right, but it's, you know, it's a new one for me to think about of how I'm going to work in the future.
Somebody said to me, how do we raise the profile of GDPR? And I said, quite simple. I said, you work the word GDPR into a Coronation Street storyline. You know, go down to the Rovers Return. You know, you're okay today? Yeah, I'm just making sure I'm GDPR compliant. You know, it sounds ridiculous, and of course it is. You know, but from your point of view, Christina, there just seems to be this sort of, people aren't really talking about it. I know the lawyers are. You could argue they've clearly got a vested interest, but you know, from a top-down process from a government body, it doesn't seem to be being spoken about. I mean, is that your experience on the front line?
I mean, firstly, Chris, UKfast have got a lot of marketing material out there about GDPR, so I
In
hope
fact,
you've seen our pocket guides lying around the office.
Just ideal for Christmas, isn't it? Can you just say?
Yeah. There is a link below,
Yeah.
shameless plug.
Yeah.
But no, on a serious note, I think there is marketing collateral out there. There is information out there for people to get themselves more clued up on GDPR. You know, UKfast are just one of the companies that are taking a responsibility in that area. But I think it's also, you know, it's people need to go and seek that information out, and they need to, you know, once they start to get, I suppose, more familiar with how it's going to impact them as maybe a department or a company, then you then understand the information that you need to obtain. But we've started having some really interesting conversations. I know as a business, we've got a lot of our customers have been requesting information. They're asking lots of questions. How does it impact them? We're trying our best to go back to each individual customer, but also any questions that we get in through various webinars that we're running and things like that. You know, we're trying to go back to each individual person. But what's coming out of, you know, we've prior to this, we ran 5 webinars around GDPR. And there's actually very consistent questions that are coming out. That it's the same thing that people are asking, which is, what do I need to do now to get ready? And you know, we're going back to everyone saying, just cleanse your data, obtain consent. After May, you're not going to be able to contact these same people, your database, unless you have consent, or you can prove that you've obtained consent.
You just talk about cleanse your data, and I've got a question here from Pauline from Frenger Consulting, which I want to come back to. Cleanse your data. You've got lots of data around people that you've engaged with.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so if we ask the panel and everybody come up, what should we be doing now to get ready for GDPR? From a data cleansing point of view, you should be going down that from A to Z and working out that person doesn't want to be engaged with us.
I think, I wouldn't say it's quite laborious as that, but I think that there is a depending on how big your database is, there is a, and this is a marketing challenge, a creative way that you can probably get in touch with people, or you know, find out if they want to be contacted by you, and really, you know, if your marketing team or whoever it might be that's relevant understand the regulations about how you can contact them now. It's about speaking to them now whilst you still can, and you're not tied down to these new regulations. But you know, on a UKfast basis, we're going out there and we're having conversations with people, we're calling them up, we're contacting them by email, we're just saying, you know, hey, do you still want to hear from us? This is how it's going to add to your business. So
I think businesses need to be careful and not think it's okay to still contact people before that deadline. I mean, Flybe were in the news recently about sending some emails out to their customer base. I think they found a list of about 80,000 customers. They weren't sure if they had consent or not, so they sent an email out saying, did you give consent or not? We're not sure. And they also put a link at the bottom saying, as part of this exercise, you'll be entered into a prize draw. And they got fined about 70 grand. So just emailing people before that cut-off point isn't always an option. Be careful. You know, Flybe and Honda both got done at a similar sort of time. Honda got fined about 12 grand. And they didn't put marketing messages on the bottom. It's a case of, we found your data somewhere, we're not sure where it's come from, can you say yes or no? So just be careful.
But there's lots of examples, or some really nice examples, aren't there? Like out there about, you know, the likes of Sainsbury's that have already started implementing this. You know, there's some really big brands that have thought of some really nice creative ways to start obtaining consent, but I think it's understanding what the implications are now, and you know, just having a bit of common sense as well. Thinking,
well, consent's not the only grounds for contacting, is it? You've got legitimate interest as well. It's consent's only really for the marketing side of things, really.
What's your take on it? I mean, if we were to go down and say, what should people be doing now? Listen, a lot of people are on the front line, you know, so you know, you're not the lawyers, but what should people be doing now? What would your advice be?
I think it boils down to just a couple of key areas. One of them's on the cybersecurity side. There are a couple of really good programs, Cyber Essentials and Cyber Essentials Plus. Cyber Essentials is really a questionnaire, and it just allows a business to ask itself some really pertinent questions about how you're protecting that data. Have you got the processes to manage it? So it's free to go and look at it. It is
like a self-MOT.
It is like an MOT. It's a self-check, and I think that's a really good place to start, just to satisfy yourself that you've got some measures in that are going to protect that data.
I've obviously done my research, you know that, but I just wanted to refresh my mind. The ICO, who are obviously the people who find people, March 27th, 2007, 2 companies have been fined a total of 83 grand for breaking the rules about how people's personal information should be treated when sending marketing emails. An investigation by the ICO found Flybe deliberately sent more than 3.3 million emails to people who had been told who'd been told they didn't want to receive marketing emails from the firm. Yeah. The emails sent in August 2016 by Flybe with the title, "Are your details correct?" You know, it was that point again, ignorance is going to be no defence. I mean, I suppose, you know, when you're offering advice to clients, you're not a GDPR expert. You're not somebody who's going to go in there and you're going to offer compliance. You're just going to offer good common sense advice. But I suppose it's a question of knowing what you don't know.
It is, and I mean, those are obviously examples of a good few months ago now, so I'm sure they're going to be highlighted again as the perils of what can happen if you don't get your house in order. I think the point's been made this morning that we don't expect a raft of fines to come in on May the 26th. There must be some leeway, but you know, it's just reiterated again, isn't it, that you've basically got 5 months to find out what it is that you don't know.
The thing is, the fines and the correctional measures are already being imposed, and they have been doing for the last 20 years. It's just that the fines are increasing from up to £500,000 up to 17 million quid. Now, there are small businesses that are being fined £10,000, £50,000, £60,000 for having their websites hacked. There's a company called Boomerang Video that did online DVD rentals. Their website got hacked and they got fined 60 grand because their security measures went up to scratch.
That's Boomerang?
Boomerang Video.
Right, okay. That's come back to haunt them, hasn't it?
But it just goes to show that don't just wait until May thinking they're going to start issuing fines out. They're already issuing fines.
The audience is going mad for that one.
Go on.
I've got some questions that have come on, that have been sent through, and I don't know whether this esteemed panel can answer them, but let's find out. Pauline from Frenger Consulting, do we need to get consent to email B2B on free government support to expand internationally, i.e. we are not selling anything? And Reem from IDT Support asks, question for Christina. Christina, you mentioned contacting customers. Is it okay to do so over the phone, or do we need to get written confirmation of authorisation of consent? I have no idea to any of that. Does anybody else feel able to answer that?
Phone calls.
It's primarily business to consumer data that this relates to. It's data citizens, which are anything that's personally identifiable information. But that said, if it's chris.hunter@HM Network, that's not my email address, by the way, but that's me personally identifiable. Even though I'm in a job role, if somebody marketed to me as director at HM Network for a business service, that's different to market to me as chris.hunter@HM Network trying to sell me underpants as a private individual. But you need to be careful, is even people with business email addresses, if they're info@companyname.com, but it's very evident that they're a sole trader, that becomes personally identifiable information.
So if somebody wants to send you, or sell you some underpants, they could be breaking the law.
Well, if they don't have my consent, potentially, yeah. And if I then raise a complaint to the ICO and say that these people have never got my consent to market to me, they have to give me the option to be able to update my own preferences, they have to give me the options to opt out, And if I then raise a complaint because they've not followed my requests, then I can raise a complaint to the ICO. And all it takes is one complaint and you get
I'd love to see that headline. You know, Chris complains about, you know,
Y-front's pushing.
Y-front's pushing, yeah. Christina, the question from Reem was, you mentioned contacting customers. Is it okay to do so over the phone, or do we need written confirmation of authorisation of consent? I mean, is there a right way and a wrong way of going about it?
Phone calls is an interesting one, and you know, I'm by no means a legal expert. This is why I have in-house lawyers. As far as I'm aware, phone calls is slightly a grey area at the moment. There's no strict regulations to say, unless it's linked to a personal name, as you say, or
you have to check if they're on the telephone preference services. If they've been on like X directory, for example, and they've opted out of telephone marketing, you have to check against the list.
But is that not until May, or is that now?
No, it's already.
See, I'm learning every day.
This falls under the Privacy of Electronic Communication regulation from 2003.
That was, that was the one I thought it was.
PECA, yeah. Well, these are things that have been...
PECA?
You've got DPA, which is Data Protection, and PECA, which is like Privacy of Electronic Communication. In regards to, in relation to email marketing, electronic marketing, faxes, there's a number of councils who've been fined for sending faxes to the wrong number by mistake. For child sex cases, they've missed out by one digit, got fined 150 grand. So it's not just about email marketing.
But you know what, everybody's been fined, don't you?
I know.
I do. Well, the thing is, we're a micro business, and we learnt about the GDPR probably in January of this year. So we've had 10 and a half, 11 months at it. And we were very aware that businesses of all shapes and sizes didn't have a Scooby-Doo what was going on. So we made an effort and we said, right, we're going to use ourselves as a real life case study. We're going to show people that we're a small business going through this ourselves.
You say small business, how big is
we're a micro business. Essentially, HM Network, up until recently, was 2 people. But we've doubled in size in the last 4 or 5 weeks, to a whole 4. But we've also got an extended network of specialists that we work with. So they become data processors on our behalf.
A lot of businesses are small businesses, you know, and the thing is that was one of the issues that came about early stage. Is this just aimed at the big businesses, or are the small businesses relevant?
Everybody.
Everybody.
I actually met with the ICO, kind of by my mistake, about 3 or 4 weeks ago. There was an international convention of commissioners at the Hilton Hotel in Manchester, and I thought it was going to be a bit of a Q&A with Elizabeth Denham, who's the ICO, and a number of businesses like us. I got there, it was all the international commissioners from around the world, about 800 of the ICO staff from the UK, and little old me at the back. So I took the opportunity to speak to the Deputy Commissioner at lunchtime, and he said, oh, are you one of our guys? I went, no, actually, we've been running awareness sessions on GDPR, and explained what we did and how many businesses we've seen since June, and he commended us, and he said, well, can I ask you a question? How's it going down in the real world? And I said, if I'm honest, the micro businesses and small businesses are all papping themselves. I said, there's no guidance out for micro businesses. You think that small businesses are SMEs, which are 250 and above, really, or up to 250-ish. I said, and the majority of businesses are people who've started a business out of the back bedroom, who've expanded, they've taken friends on, they've run with things and grown with it, and they've never adhered to the existing DPA or the PECA regulation. So people are running businesses that don't know the current regulations, and that's what half of the problem is.
You need a fluorescent jacket, that's what you need. you know, that's what you need, because you sound like you should have a position of authority. But this is what came through loud and clear earlier today about the ignorance. I mean, another question we've been asked is Dan from Dan Tech. I like what you've done there, Dan. We are all business to business. Does GDPR apply to people's work details?
If you've got employees, that is personally identifiable information.
So the answer is yes, Dan.
Yes.
The answer is yes.
If your full name's in your email address, then yes, that's personal identifiable information.
Are you worried, to my left,
No.
by what we're hearing? No. Not worried at all?
No. It's the millennium bug all over again. Anyone who's in business who has any kind of shred of integrity looks after people's data, and they put the proper processes and steps in their place to do that. The GDPR isn't it is a new thing, but we've had so much stuff that's been around for years to try and protect people. It's just something else that's just come out of Europe.
Well, the Millennium Bug's completely different. The reason the Millennium Bug came out is because people didn't know if computers would stop working as soon as it went to 2000.
I mean the fuss, though. The level of fuss we're now getting.
The reality is the GDPR for the 25th of May is the starting block. That's the start of the journey, and moving forward, everyone needs to comply. It's not a case of...
Chris, I'm going to disagree with you there. I'm going to disagree with you now. Okay, because a lot of people say that the starting of the race is the 25th of May. It's not. The start of the race...
2 years ago.
It's 2 years ago. You know, so the start, it's continuing.
But what I mean is you don't just sign it off and that's it done. It becomes part of your working life.
No,
it becomes the basis of what you're doing.
What about in terms of if you've done nothing so far, is it too late? is it that phrase, you know, Captain Mannering, don't panic, you know, and I get the impression of people running around like, you know, headless chickens and stuff like that. Is it too late, or is actually people having a reasonable conversation? Anna?
Yeah, I think for us, it started those conversations for us, you know, and especially for small businesses, we haven't got a huge amount of data, we haven't got a huge amount of kind of estate or you know, pockets of different data everywhere. So I think for us, now that we do have a focus on us, actually to do that data audit, you know, it's not a massive job to do that, and then to kind of re-look at where that's data stored, make sure that this, you know, it's encrypted, you know, to the high enough standard, that the access controls are there. I think those things, you know, I think it's all manageable for us, and it's just really like, let's not panic about it. Let's do the data audit. Let's try and narrow our scope where we can, so get rid of data that we don't need or use, and get the policies in place, and get our staff members who are dealing with customers kind of trained up as much as they need to be. And like you say, it's an ongoing process then, isn't it? You have to embed it in your daily work, because we should always be caring about our customer data. And we probably, you know, we should always have done, but this has just kind of raised the awareness, I think, as to how much we need to.
Liz, I think Christina made a really good point, and that a lot of people see it as a negative, but actually it's quite a positive, isn't it? Because you see so many security hacks in the news every day. It could be the NHS, could be TalkTalk, could be Yahoo, could be anybody. Experian, I think, were done, weren't they? You know, actually, I want to know that my data is safe.
Of course you do. So I think, I mean, in my world, obviously, it's all about health data and your personal health data that's potentially stored on a health app. And one of the biggest barriers to people and clinicians, particularly using health apps, is trust and knowledge as to whether that product meets standards and regulations. And so what that means is that if you are a small company, it's really difficult to get profile. How do you get traction in a crowded marketplace? And so what this gives companies the ability to do is to differentiate themselves and to get to the top of a list because they've met the standards and regulations that are required, which means then that the trust issue is supported, because healthcare organisations and professionals can find a product that's fit for purpose, and the product, irrelevant of size, is able to prove that it's the best in class.
You look a cool customer, Dan. The sort of guy that if I played you at poker, and I've never played poker in my life, I couldn't tell what your hand was by looking at your face. Behind that relaxed exterior, are you nervous?
I actually think my view on this is that it's going to make some companies stronger and it's going to make some companies weaker. My view is that at the end of the day, what we're trying to do here is, there's two aspects of this. One, keep data secure, but also one, make people aware about what you're doing with their data. So really say, okay, look, this is what I'm doing. But you don't just do that once. You have to do it on multiple occasions. So you can't collect this data and say, look, I've got authority to collect this. You have to keep letting them know. At the end of the day, my view is that if you've got a good reason to collect data, then actually that's going to make you a much stronger business than someone that's actually collecting data that hasn't got a good reason. Because then people that are collecting people's data and they haven't got a good reason for it, is actually they're going to be people that fall over. Or actually for us as a company, it doesn't really worry me, because we actually have a good reason to collect people's data. Because what we do, and it's all about, I put it back to benefit. If you give someone the benefit of collecting their data, and you give a reason why, actually, I'm collecting this data about your home, but what I'm giving you back energy savings, I'm saving you money, I'm keeping you secure, I'm keeping you safe. I give a benefit back to them. The people it's really going to hurt is people that are taking data and not giving a benefit back to consumers.
Misusing it.
Yeah, and that's where I'm not worried about it for that, because actually people from our perspective is that they can stop us collecting. They can say turn off us collecting data, but actually the home isn't going to be intelligent and it's not going to do what it's meant to do. So you're not going to buy into the product, because actually the reason what we do, collect data to make your life easier.
I've got a question that's been sent to me. I'm just checking Twitter as well, because I've been sent some questions on that as well. I do believe Austin from Clark Integrated Technologies says, EU citizens travelling abroad buying services outside of the EU, example holiday rental in the US. Does the US rental have to comply with GDPR? Well, I'll confer to the experts, but GDPR is a European legislation.
If you're a European citizen, then I would think yes. I'm not an expert, but I would think yes.
Well, you're the best expert amongst us.
I mean, just to caveat this, we run a series of events and we say, listen, we are not the experts. However, we know this much now, and we've only been doing this for 11 months, so we try and share what we've learnt with businesses to help them get to the same sort of level and show them the help that we've had externally.
I suppose if it's an American business now, they don't have to comply because they're not.
No.
If the citizen's a UK citizen or an EU citizen, they do.
But it's an American company.
There are American
matter.
companies at the moment and not providing services to the
matter.
UK because they're terrified of the
If Apple
breaches.
trade in the US primarily and have one customer in the EU, they have to be GDPR compliant.
It's one of those things where you get a question, you think to yourself, you know what, I hope somebody on this panel knows the answer. I'm not sure myself. I've got a couple of public sector questions, so I'm going to turn to you right now. Okay. The public sector is less agile than the private sector. Is it going to be more difficult for the public sector to get its ducks in a row? UKfast are obsessed with ducks. I meant ducks about 4 times. So, is it going to be? And it is true that that the public sector is unfairly, perhaps sometimes, is seen as a bit glacial. Is it going to be more difficult for them than it is for for private companies?
Generally, yes. I think that is true. I think they are probably the biggest holders of personally identifiable information. So their databases are huge. Duplicate records everywhere because they're not very efficient.
Well. It's not just digital,
paper records, yeah. When you think about the hospitals, a lot of that still.
Site storage that they've got loads of records.
So I think yes. I mean, just the mass of personal data that the government holds on us all. I think it will be hard.
You work with the health sector, Liz, and the health sector's got a reputation for being a bit slow. In fact, I recently hosted an event with about over 100 clinicians in Bruce Keogh, and actually the level of professionalism in that room was quite astounding.
Absolutely.
But the technology that sits behind some of the clinicians just isn't fit for purpose as well. Do you think the health sector, the public sector, do you think they're ready for GDPR?
So I think that there's a couple of levels to that question. I think that on your point, I think that the public sector at large do have a challenge because they are so big, but they are very aware of data protection. And I mean, I'm a clinician by background. You are taught in your training to be very, very careful about data. There are droves of policies, huge amounts of mandatory training, huge amounts of annual updates around information governance, and it's very clear what the consequence of not adhering to those processes are. So as a clinician, you are extremely and acutely aware of that. I'm not saying they don't have challenges, but I actually think that potentially they're in a better position than some other people because it is embedded right from your early training as a clinician, and then obviously as a service manager you get checks around how you're governing data, and then at board level it's high on the agenda. So I think that the technology that sits underneath, I think that the NHS particularly are extremely keen to innovate. One of the challenges is how can they assure themselves of the data that they're bringing in, and I think that that's probably the area that they're less ready on.
I want to keep this real, and relevant. Okay, so I'm just looking at what's trending in the world at the moment. Okay. The British Medical Council has published a light-hearted article by GP Dr. Catherine Bell in which she asks, does Peppa Pig encourage inappropriate use of primary care resources?
I heard this morning.
What's your view on that? What's Peppa Pig got to do with GDPR?
Did anybody hear this story this morning? No. So Peppa Pig phones up the doctor and the doctor answers the phone, and the doctor says, I will pop over and come and see you, and the message that has gone out is that's misrepresenting what the NHS is able to do within its current resource. I think that on a personal level, Peppa Pig misrepresents a lot of life. As a parent of 2 children, I am quite often dismayed at the fact that Mrs. Peppa Pig allows the children to splash and get super dirty and then walk around the house in Wellington boots. So that's my answer to that. I think that she misrepresents a lot of.
But isn't it fascinating? I'm trying to link this back to GDPR in my mind, and I'm struggling. To be honest. So Dave. But the thing is, don't you find we live in a world at the moment whereby everything that's said, like everything that's said, somebody will take it a different way. We talk about sort of GDPR, we talk about this whole issue of GDPR, you know, is that, you know, more people will talk about Peppa Pig today than they will about how do you get your business GDPR compliant. You know, how do you make GDPR, and can I say it's sexy? I mean, what do we need to do to get people engaged with GDPR? Because you're responsible businesses in this panel, you know, that's the reason you're here for, that's the reason we're holding this webinar for. Not to say companies are irresponsible for not engaging with it, but I mean, how many businesses just think...
There's been a really good example actually. I think it was one of the holiday companies, the orange one, EasyJet. They've just done a video to explain to people why they collect data and what they do with it. And I wouldn't be surprised if there's going to be a raft more videos with businesses saying, this is what we do with your data, this is where we collect it from, and this is why we use it. I think Channel 4 did one about 5 years ago.
Channel 4 did one recently.
Have they done one recently?
Yeah.
Alan Carr did one, and he explained that, you know, we collect data so we can market to you, so we can understand what your interests are, so we can make programs that you'll be interested in. And I think people are open and transparent. People are more likely to give data up because they know they're going to get something at the back end of it, like what you were saying before.
Yeah, benefit. It's always about a benefit. At the end of the day, you're not going to give all this information away without not getting something back.
But here's a question, let's play devil's advocate here. You know when you phone somebody up and they say, we're recording this conversation for training purposes. Does anybody ever listen to that conversation, or is it a catch-all? You know, is it...
You have to be very careful with that. A lot of the tracking that's being used in the online world for digital advertising, they're using, so you know when you get a telephone number, you dial the telephone number, speak to the company, that call is being recorded. Now, what should happen is at the point where you start giving over your credit card details, it's supposed to stop. Yeah. We've had companies where we've had problems with this particular service, and when we've gone in and listened to some of the calls to see what was actually said and why was this value wrong, I can hear all the credit card details. I could sit there with a pen and paper and write it all down. And if you as a business don't realise that whoever's configured that and set it up should have made sure that it was all turned off at that point, what kind of liability does that leave you open to? It's terrifying. You know,
well, that's why you need to renegotiate with your supply chain and have contracts in place with data processors and data controllers to say, we provide this service to you on the basis of X, Y and Z, please sign here.
I went to a social media training course recently, and because I'm quite sad like that. And they were looking at the Facebook terms and conditions, and I could be doing Facebook a complete disservice. It could have been Twitter. I can't remember because I was a bit tired by then. And I think it was 35 pages of T's and C's. You know, the thing is with this,
people don't read them.
No, that's the point.
They don't read them. They just want the service.
Just wanted to. I mean, Dave, that just seems to be. You know, we're busy people. You know, we're busy people. You know, we've both worked in journalism for a long time. I don't know if journalists are the worst sector.
Probably.
But I just think you say, I want this, you sign it. Because if it was really nasty, there'd be a story out there warning us about it.
But journalists are the first people who take the instructions out of the booklet and chuck them in the bin and just say, well, I can do that.
No, absolutely, absolutely. And then in about 10 minutes later, we're opening the bin to try and find the instructions.
Part of that, though, with the GDPR is when you're actually signing up for it, is that you have to highlight all the important parts of it. So in your terms and conditions, if you will, you can have 20 pages, but actually you need to highlight to make it simpler for the consumer to say, okay, this is what we're doing in black and white. So you're not reading 20 pages, and that's part of it, to say, okay, highlight the important stuff. So
I think that's the not exciting necessarily for everybody, but I think that's the interesting part of GDPR, and that's something that I know a lot of businesses are already starting to implement is, you know, you can have God knows how many pages when it comes to the level of terms and conditions, but you can be really selective with firstly the information that you share with that company, but also the information that you want to receive from them. So you can break down, and you need to break it down by platform, by brand or by business, or even by product or service. You know, even as a business, you want to contact them about a brand message, but you also need to give consent about a specific product as well. And you need to articulate that and break it out, even if it is buried in 25 pages of terms and conditions.
You need to give the data subjects the right to change their mind as well. You need to be able to give them a platform so they can change their own preferences. Now, somebody might say today, yes, I agree to that, and it's not a case of you've got the consent, therefore moving forward forever you've got it. Don't forget that the data that people work with isn't the business's data. It's a digital representation of a data subject. It's never the business's data to own. And that's the problem. People think, I've collected this data, I've bought this data in, it's ours. It's not. It belongs to the data citizens, to people like you and I.
I've got a question here for you actually, Chris. What should Daddy Pig do with... Peppa Pigs. My God, like he was right on the... But no, I've got a question here. Which sectors hold more potentially damaging information? Are there some sectors that should be really scared right now?
I think if you've got sensitive information, like the health sector, then one record that's breached of sensitive information needs to be reported to the ICO within 72 hours. If you've got standard information, just like email address and telephone number, if it's more than 100 records, you need to raise a breach notification in 72 hours. So I would say health sector, and anything that's sensitive information like people's religions, you know, that needs to be reported as well. So everyone's equally is in the firing line.
I think in terms of the volumes of questions that we're getting in as a business, we're getting a lot of questions from charities because they don't have the resource there to, you know, they don't have a lot of legal advice, etc. They have the resource there to, I suppose, explore the questions that they have. Then I've noticed a massive sort of volume of questions or concerns coming from charities because they just haven't had the policies in place because of the lack of resource in the past to even, you know, as far as 2 years ago, get themselves protected up until this point.
You work in the public sector. We're probably going to wrap up in about 7 or 8 minutes. You work in the public sector, and the same thing that Christina mentioned about charities who have not got huge resource.
Yeah.
You know, the councils and local authorities have got so much pressure on their resources already. Are they worried about GDPR?
They are. They're, I think we touched on it earlier. They're worried when data gets merged and becomes bigger data sets. This sort of right to be forgotten, this removing yourself from a data set. A typical example, we're working with a company that's creating an anti-fraud hub. So they're taking data from lots and lots of different sources, insurance companies, local councils. So we're all a local council database somewhere. We don't want to be part of an anti-fraud investigation, do we?
No.
Well, you might want to.
I don't.
Yeah. So how do you know your name's actually in this big anti-fraud database, and then how do you apply to have it removed? Can you have it removed because it may have come from your council tax record? Should that be able to be removed? So they're struggling with these types of questions as this big data is being pulled together.
We're friends, Martin, aren't we? So I can be honest as well.
Sometimes, Chris.
No.
Yeah.
Christmas isn't for another 2 weeks, is it? Just under 2 weeks. But you've opened up a Christmas present early.
Really?
You? Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. You're wearing your Christmas jumper.
I am. Just for you, Chris. Just for you.
I feel flattered.
I'm always a week behind. It should have been Friday.
It should have been Friday.
Yeah.
I think Father Christmas needs to be GDPR compliant because he profiles data.
No, actually,
And he's probably got CCTV so the elves can see if you've been good or bad. And he needs to have the relevant signage up. So
that's actually a really, really interesting point. And I think, and I know it sounds completely ridiculous, you know, but I think this needs to be tweeted out. You know, that Chris has said that Father Christmas needs to be GDPR compliant because he's handling data.
True.
I mean, have you seen Elf?
Yes.
The film? It's not mentioned, is it? GDPR. No. We almost need a stupid headline.
The elves are data processing.
GDPR.
Well, you've got it now.
And that's stupid.
Yeah.
You've made it.
Okay, you can send it out as a press release, Dave. So, okay, what next then? What next? Anna, what next? What happens next? Because I think a lot of people think it's next year, and it is technically, but then when you actually say it's probably 6 months away, it's 100 days away, it's, you know, it's a bit like when the World Cup comes round. What happens next? What do we see next?
So for us, it's a continuous process. We've got a bit of a plan. We're understanding where our data is. We need to work with our suppliers to ensure that they're compliant and get the right bits into the contract. We need to work with our employees to make sure that they've got the right level. We need to update all our security policies. So yeah, it's ongoing. I think it's just going to be part of kind of business life now. You know, if you're dealing with customer data, you just need to be more careful about it, and you need to consider GDPR from the beginning as well, especially if you're building new products and new data sets that you're going to involve.
You fly all over the world, Elizabeth, from
Off to
Silicon
Paris
Valley.
tomorrow. Yes.
Right?
Off to Paris to work the rest of the week.
Are they having conversations with you about GDPR?
What, the French?
Yeah.
They speak to you.
Let's not offend the French.
We offended the Russians last week.
Yeah. Let's not offend anybody. Let's make this mission control. Let's not offend anybody. It's so close. But you know, do you see I mean, are the French, whoever it is, are they talking to you about GDPR?
No, nobody's talking about GDPR. We do use it as a selling point when the sort of whole hosting thing, when we sort of made a big song and dance about how we host in the UK and Europe only, and we use that as a selling point overseas to let everyone know that we take this sort of thing very, very seriously. We've had process in the office in terms of making sure all the staff are cyber trained. Barclays Bank, we've banked Barclays, and they've been brilliant. You can ring them up and they'll do a webinar with your staff for an hour, because it's mainly your staff that are going to cause you the problems. If you can't treat data properly, then you shouldn't be in business anyway. But no, we're not hearing it from anyone. We fly the flag in terms of we do things better over here in Europe and but no, nobody's talking about it.
Got a question here from Peter from PMG Software. Data encryption. If personal data is encrypted, I understand there is no need to report a breach. Is that correct? Once again, I'm hoping somebody...
I can kind of answer that.
Okay, I thought it would be you.
So,
Can I ask you a question, Chris? Is that my wife has a fear of flying, and in order to get over a fear of flying, she played a...
Mr. T style. You're talking about the A-team before.
This isn't Mr. T and Burkham. But his fear of flying, she played this tape, because we share a bed, I had to listen to as well, and it was, if you believe you can achieve, it was all about conquering your fears, etc., etc. If you've got like a GDPR headset next to your bed, where you know everything. So Peter's question was, from PMG Software, data encryption. If personal data is encrypted, I understand there is no need to report a breach. Is that correct? And one thing I would say as well, this is the best advice we can give. There is other advice available, so it's just a discussion.
I'd always check with the solicitor. However, if you have a laptop that is encrypted and you lose it in a taxi or it gets stolen, you don't have to raise a breach notification if it does go missing.
You don't, or you do?
You don't.
You don't.
If it isn't encrypted, then you do have to raise a breach notification if it goes missing.
Right, okay. I'm not sure I answered the question. So if
it depends where it's stored. Are we talking about on a laptop, on a personal phone, on a BYOD device?
If personal data is encrypted, I understand there is no need to report a breach. Is that correct? Well, if you send a message that's encrypted, nobody else can understand what that message is.
Okay, so if somebody sent a list of 200 records on an Excel spreadsheet, and it's just an open document and it goes to the wrong place.
Yeah, it gets sent to Martin.
Then yes, you have to raise a breach notification. If it's an encrypted document and they've got no way of opening it without a password, then no, you don't.
That's common sense, isn't it? That's common sense.
So don't share data, in open documents.
Okay. No one has access to the data, is it? At the end of the day, if it's encrypted, you can't get access to it, so you're not sharing data. So
yeah. Peter, I hope we've answered that question. Can I just say, if Chris can't answer it, I'm not sure anybody else on this panel can.
You were talking about going to sleep with sort of GDPR stuff. I do listen to webinars in the car, which is quite sad, but I think
don't go to sleep in a car, Chris.
No. But I think it goes to show that if businesses haven't made a start yet, just immersing yourself in it and learning about stuff, rather than listening to the radio, will help you get up to speed.
We need Chris Rea to rewrite his song, Driving Home for Christmas, listening to GDPR. It could take off. Okay, final question then, left to right. We're going to start with Dan at the end. Okay, we've got an audience of millions. Okay, we're talking about GDPR. And you know what I found really interesting? We've had a few laughs along the way with GDPR. It's quite a dry subject. But the discussion today was really lively as well beforehand. Okay, what message do you take away from today, and what's the one, if you were to crystallise it down to one thought with GDPR, what would it be?
Don't steal people's data and not give them a benefit.
Yeah.
Don't take data and don't give a benefit. If you don't give them a benefit, then it's like, if you're not going to give them something back for that, then actually it's
like
right,
Facebook. Facebook, they provide a social media platform for you to communicate with people all around the world. You don't mind if they know what you're having for breakfast. I don't. Maybe other people do. Liz?
I'd say only keep the data that you absolutely need. Less is more.
That was a very succinct answer as well. Okay, try not to offend anybody in this house. Try not to.
With no offence intended. Just don't panic. I think there's a lot of people scaremongering at the moment. If you, there's sort of some great tips here. Don't panic. It's all going to be fine.
Okay, Anna?
I think what I've learned from today especially is that you're just not alone in it. There's lots of other businesses that are going through the same thing, and especially as a small business, there's potential to maybe learn off others as well.
No, I think safety in numbers, isn't it? You know, the idea that you're all on your own. What was interesting, the range of questions we got earlier, both in terms of the webinar and from the event, were from very different businesses. You know, construction, you know, you did a whole range of different businesses. Dave, what's your, what one nugget do you take away from today?
I think for any business, it's like any other big task, get started. You know, stop putting it off. It's how do you eat an elephant, one bite at a time. No,
and the thing is that if you're not ready on May the 25th, that's one thing. But if you've not got the process started,
that's completely.
They're going to look really badly at you, aren't they? Yeah. What's your one piece of advice?
Don't let it become a legal team to legal team issue. Have reasonable conversations with your supply chain, with your partners, with the owners. Just have face-to-face, proper conversations.
Christina?
Mine's probably more just see it as an opportunity and not as a threat. And I think it's a really great opportunity for you to get richer data.
No, and I think, you know, the mindset's changed, isn't it? I thought earlier that it was quite negative but honest. But it's probably, when you speak to real businesses, it's probably actually, you know, what's the worst that can happen? Let's wake up to it. Chris, what's your piece of advice? And can I just say thank you for coming onto this panel. You've been brilliant.
I would say assess.
Fantastic. The second best Chris on the panel.
I would say assess your situation and the data that you've got, why you've got it. I would also get a plan of action together, and at least do a roadmap of where you think you should be over the next 6-7 months, because we've only got about 163 days left. If the ISO do come knocking,
163. What knowledge is that?
We've got a ticker on our website that counts it down. Again, we're just trying to raise awareness. I would say so. Assess what you've got, review what you've got, get a plan of action together, and work with partners. If you can't do things in house, find people that can help you. It doesn't have to cost the earth. You know, we put a lot of free guidance out and a lot of free seminars, but we've also worked with a lot of professionals that we've had to pay for. You know, you wouldn't try and self-serve legal advice. You go to a solicitor for certain things. So ask the people help when you need it, you know. Do what you can in-house, but ask for help when you need it.
Chris, thank you very much. Thank you to all our panel as well. Thank you to the audience as well, both in terms of in the room and watching this webinar. It's the first webinar that Business Cloud has held, and we've held it with our friends at UKfast. I hope you found it enjoyable. I hope you've enjoyed it as well. Most of the, well, in fact, the entire panel I regard as friends, you know, so we do try and inject a little bit of humour into it as well, and it just remains for me to wish you a happy and merry and healthy Christmas and New Year. Thank you.